The first time it whispered my name, I was staying at a roadside motel just off Route 32, tucked between the forgotten edges of a dying pine forest and the kind of hills that never make it onto maps. My room was damp. The kind of damp that makes your skin itch like it remembers a flood. I'd been on the road for weeks by then, chasing something I couldn't name, a feeling, maybe. A kind of pulling in the chest, like a thread tied to something I couldn't see. That night, I dreamt of my childhood bedroom. The pink nightlight. The smell of rain through the cracked window. And someone calling my name, not yelling. Calling. Soft and low, like they'd been doing it for hours. Like they never expected to be heard. I woke with the taste of pine needles in my mouth. The motel was still. No wind, no passing cars. Just that humming kind of silence that isn't silence at all. And then, again, my name. Spoken just outside the window. Not a whisper, not quite. More like breath given form. I turned on the light. Nothing. I looked outside, just the woods. Still. Watching. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next evening, I drove out, thinking distance would help. Got 3 towns over, pulled into a gas station diner, drank 2 coffees and pretended I was just tired. But when dusk bled into night and the shadows between the trees grew long and reaching, it came again. My name. On the wind, behind me, ahead of me. Always near. I didn't remember turning off the main road. I didn't remember cutting the engine. But suddenly, I was standing beneath a cluster of ancient birch, the air heavy with moss and something older. Before me, half swallowed by vines and fog, stood a house. It looked as though it had been forgotten by time. Rotting wood, shattered windows, a porch slouched like a dying man in prayer. But one light burned inside. A single oil lamp in the front window, flickering as if breathing. And from the woods, a voice again. Softer now. Closer. Come in, Elias. My name. Not just spoken. No. And God help me, I did. The door creaked open without touch. It didn't groan like you'd expect. It sighed, slow and deep, as if it were tired from holding secrets. I stepped inside, and the smell hit me first. Not rot. Not dust. Something warmer. Like old books, dry lavender, and the faint trace of something sweet and burning, like honey poured too close to a candle. The room was dim, but not dark. That single lamp burned low on a table near the wall. Its flame danced, casting slow-moving shadows that swayed as if they had somewhere to be. The furniture was antique, lace runners, carved wood, green velvet chairs long faded to the color of bruises. No cobwebs. No dust. As though someone still lived there. I called out. Hello. No answer. But something hummed. Not from upstairs. Not the basement. The walls themselves. A low, broken lullaby, the kind grandmothers sing when they think the child is already asleep. It moved around me, just beyond hearing. Then, the floor creaked behind me. I turned. No one. The flame flared slightly on the lamp. A new sound joined the hum. Words, half-formed, half-remembered. A child's prayer I hadn't heard in decades. Now I lay me down to sleep, I pray the Lord my soul. I whispered the rest without meaning to. The words slipped out like they'd been waiting. That's when I noticed it, something changed when I spoke. The shadows paused. The humming grew clearer, closer. Like the house was, listening. My name came again. This time not from outside. Not even from a room. It came from behind the wallpaper. Elias, tell me something true. I backed away, breath shallow. My fingers trembled, brushing against the lace on the table. It was warm. Too warm. Like someone had just been sitting there. I should have run. I wanted to. But something in me, the part that still aches for childhood lullabies and secrets whispered under covers, kept me rooted. Who are you? I asked. The humming paused. The walls exhaled. Then, ever so gently. I am where the forgotten go. And upstairs, a door slowly creaked open. The stairway groaned with each step, not in protest, but anticipation. As if the house had been waiting for this moment. For me. The wallpaper here peeled like shedding skin, revealing old, faded script beneath. I didn't recognize the language, but the letters twisted in a way that made my teeth ache just looking at them. The open door at the end of the hall was barely ajar, its edge trembling as though moved by breath. From within, a pale light pulsed, irregular and faint, like a heartbeat too weak to continue. I pushed it open. The room was not empty. It was full of me. Photographs, pinned to every surface. Some I recognized, some I didn't. Me as a boy with scraped knees and missing teeth. Me, older, standing on porches I never remembered stepping onto. Me, asleep in beds I'd never seen before. And the sound. Oh, the sound. A soft chittering, no, whispering, in hundreds of voices. Some childlike, others hoarse and aged. They spoke from the walls. The floorboards. The ceiling. Each voice sounded like someone I had known, and others I hadn't met yet. Elias, they sang. Tell us your secret. I staggered back, heart thumping. What is this place? The lamp flickered violently, casting long shadows that danced across the walls like puppets in a nightmare play. The voices quieted, save one. A woman's voice. Familiar, distant, lost. My mother's voice. You never told anyone, not even me, she said. But I know. I know what you did by the river that summer. I felt the blood leave my face. No one knew that story. No one was there. The room pulsed again, this time with something alive. The floor felt soft beneath my feet, like earth, not wood. And I realized, the house was breathing. Tell us, Elias, the voices chorused, 1,000 mouths behind the plaster and the beams. Secrets are seeds. Let yours grow roots. In the center of the room, the floorboards parted like wet bark. Beneath, not soil, but darkness, deeper than cellars, older than sleep. And a single phrase, barely audible now, drifted from the black. Belong to us. I should have run. But my secret was already bleeding out of me. And the house was listening. I don't know when I knelt. One moment I was standing above the open wound in the floor, and the next I was on my hands and knees, trembling over the darkness below. It pulsed with a lightless rhythm, like a second heart in the house. My breath fogged in the air, though the room was not cold. Quite the opposite. It was the warmth of a fever. Of a closeness not meant for the living. The voices had gone silent. That was worse. The stillness felt expectant, like the hush before the last note of a lullaby. Then, quietly, you remember now. It wasn't a question. The voice no longer needed to ask. I remembered the river. The soft splash. The moment my childhood friends' laughter turned into something else. How I stood frozen, not moving, not helping, just watching. And how, afterwards, I never told a soul, not even when they asked. Not even when they cried. I whispered, I was just a kid. The house replied, but you remember. And that, it seemed, was enough. The shadows pressed in. Not with malice, but with eagerness. They curled around me, like long-lost siblings returning to embrace. The photos on the walls began to change, shifting like reflections on disturbed water. The images became possibilities, lives I never lived, paths I never took. A wedding to a stranger I somehow loved. Children with my eyes. A funeral where I was the one in the casket. Each one hummed with the same melody, what could have been. I wanted to scream. I wanted to leave. But my legs no longer listened to me. To belong, the house whispered, soft as prayer, is to be held in silence. To be remembered by forgetting. Give us your voice, Elias. Stay. Let the house carry your story. I opened my mouth, but no sound came. My breath caught, and I felt it then, the stillness inside me. My voice, myself, slipping like thread through a needle too fine to grasp. The house did not want my life. It wanted my memory. And I wanted to let go. Because when the world forgets you, nothing can hurt you again. And so I stayed. In that room that breathes. Where the walls remember, and the forest still whispers. If you walk that trail and hear your name, don't follow. Not unless you're ready to disappear into the hush beneath the floorboards. Not unless your secrets are tired of being alone. Not unless you, too, wish to belong. Forever. It began with the creak of old wood beneath his spine. He opened his eyes to a ceiling made of beams darkened with time, the grain like twisted veins in bruised skin. The air was thick, dry, and utterly still. No dust floated in the sunlight. There was no hum of insects, no birdsong beyond the glass. The man sat up slowly on a low cot, the mattress dipped like someone had been lying there for centuries. The room was empty but for the cot, a crooked wooden chair, and a small table with a candle that had burned down to a puck of wax. He stood, legs unsure, heart thumping as silence pressed against him like a second skin. The windows, 4 of them, let in light that felt too even, too soft. No door. Not on this wall. Not on the next. He walked the perimeter, hand brushing against cold timber. No door. Not even seams in the grain where one might have been hidden. Only windows, each showing the same sparse woodland outside, towering pines, silver-barked trees, thick moss carpeting the forest floor like frozen velvet. He tried to call out, but no sound escaped his throat. His tongue worked, his lungs moved, but the air swallowed everything. Panic clawed at him then. He slammed his fist against the wall. No echo. He tried again. Still silence. That was when he noticed it, the forest. Every time he turned to a different window, the trees had rearranged themselves. A log lay fallen in one view, standing upright in another. Branches bent differently, shadows shifted like slow fingers. And the light hadn't changed. Minutes passed. Or hours. It was impossible to tell. There were no clocks, no hunger, no thirst. His watch, missing. His phone, gone. He sat in a crooked chair, body tense as a tripwire. That's when he saw it. A slip of parchment folded into a square, tucked under the candle base. He opened it. The handwriting was unmistakable. It was his own. Cursive, shaking slightly, just like how he wrote when cold or afraid. Do not remember. Please, God, do not remember. The ink was old, rust-brown like dried blood. The paper cracked at the folds. He flipped it over. Another message, smaller. Each time you do, she gets closer. A floorboard creaked behind him. But when he turned, there was only the window. And outside, between the trees, something shifted. Something watched. He didn't sleep. It wasn't that he couldn't, it was that the concept itself began to feel foreign. Time softened, became fog. He blinked, and the candle was whole again. Blinked again, and it was a stump. Nothing moved inside the house except him, and yet, things were never quite where he left them. The chair was sometimes closer to the window. The folded note had vanished. He stopped counting the windows after 6. That night, if it was night, he discovered the attic. It happened without warning. He sat on the floor, back pressed to a wall, when he noticed something overhead. A square seam in the ceiling, faint but definite. A hatch. He hadn't seen it before. A thin cord hung from it now. He pulled it. The attic door sighed open, exhaling a puff of bitter, stale air. Wooden steps unfolded downward like the house was opening its throat to swallow him. He hesitated. His heart beat in a way that felt unfamiliar, ancient. As if it remembered something his mind did not. He ascended. The attic was low and slanted, heavy with shadow despite the moonlight bleeding through slits in the roof. And in the farthest corner, nestled among dust-covered boxes, was a writing desk. On it, a journal. Leather-bound, the cover cracked with age. A candle lit beside it, not flickering, but burning still, as if trapped in a painting. He opened the book. The first page was blank. So was the second. And the third. Then. Entry 34, you are here again. I begged you not to remember. The longer you read, the more she finds you. I'm sorry. I truly am. The page shook in his hand. Not from fear. From recognition. His fingers knew these margins. His hand remembered writing here. He turned the page again. Entry 35, you asked who she was. You always ask. The answer is always the same. She lives in the silence. She wears the house. And she hates the light. Behind him, the attic hatch creaked closed on its own. Then came the whisper. Barely audible. A breath inside his ear that wasn't his own. You remember too much. He spun around, heart in his throat, but there was no one there. Only the attic. Only the quiet. Only the windows below, now 8 in number, each glowing faintly blue. Each showing the forest. And in one, the reflection of a woman standing just behind him. But when he turned, the attic was empty. And the candle had gone out. He fled the attic. Stumbling down the fold-out steps, knees striking wood, hands slick with a sweat that smelled old. The house greeted him with stillness, but not the kind he'd come to know. This silence was listening. There were now 9 windows. He hadn't miscounted. He was certain. Where once there had been 4, then 6, then 8, now 9, like eyes watching from a face without features. Each one showed a different angle of the forest. But one window no longer showed trees. It showed only black. Not darkness. Black. A solid absence, as if something stood there, just inches away, blocking all light. Waiting. He avoided looking at it again. Instead, he found himself drawn to a door he hadn't seen before. Not a real door, no handle, no hinges, but an outline on the wall. Subtle. Almost like it had been sketched there with charcoal. He ran his fingers along its edges, and the wall pulsed beneath his hand, just once. It was warm. He turned away, and when he turned back, the outline was gone. Replaced by another window. 10. He didn't scream. He couldn't. His voice had not returned. But something inside him screamed, a deeper self, buried far below his skin. A part that knew. He returned to the journal. Entry after entry waited, all in his own hand. Entry 42, you think you're the first. You're not. You're the same self, split and repeating. We've all written this. We all become the author before the forgetting returns. Entry 43, do you remember the girl in the red coat? The woods? Her whisper when the sun turned black. He did. He didn't want to. He remembered a picnic. A hand in his. A flash of red in the trees. A voice like wind in a throat full of ash. When you turn away, I walk closer. When you speak my name, I wear your shape. A sudden crash startled him. One of the windows had cracked. A thin fracture running from the corner like a spider's leg. The blackness outside that window now moved, shifting like the tide, pressing against the glass. He stepped back. In his peripheral vision, another change, a long mirror had appeared along one wall. Oval, ornate, with a frame of dark wood that writhed in impossible patterns. He approached it slowly, unwillingly. His reflection stared back. But his eyes were not his own. They were older. And something stood just behind his shoulder. Breathing. He didn't turn around. He couldn't. Because he knew that whatever stood behind him now wore his skin. Not perfectly. Just enough to fool a stranger. Not enough to fool the self. The mirror fogged slightly, as if exhaling. The reflection blinked once, then smiled. And in that moment, the silence cracked. Not with sound. But with understanding. The house had no doors, because it was never built to let anyone in, or out. It was a holding place, a thought that never ended, a place between the blink and the breath. And it had always been his. A memory that refused to die. He ran. Not because he believed there was escape, but because something in his bones remembered motion, remembered fleeing. The rooms bent impossibly, hallways looping where none had existed. Windows multiplied, 12, 13, then 14, each one flickering between scenes. One showed a child lost in the woods. One showed a noose swinging gently in an empty stairwell. One showed him, sitting in the attic, writing this very page. Entry 57, you are not alone here. You never were. The house is made of your forgetting. And she is what remains when memory is gone. He stopped before the final window. It was small, square, no bigger than a porthole. Inside it, he saw a figure. A girl in a red coat. Standing in a corridor of ash-colored trees. She looked up. Right into his eyes. And smiled. Then, slowly, she raised her hand and tapped on the other side of the glass. Tap. 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 Behind him, the mirror shattered. Not with sound, but with motion. He turned. There was no mirror. No wall. Only a room, an entirely new room, long and narrow, lined with dozens of empty chairs, all facing one direction. At the far end stood a lectern, and upon it, the journal. Open. He walked to it, trembling. One final entry awaited. Entry 77, if you've read this far, you already know. You remembered. And now she is part of you. Look into the nearest window. Count them. Count how many there are now. If the number is 14, leave this book here. If it is 15, it is already too late. He turned slowly. There were 15 windows. The forest in each writhed with shadows. One showed a woman walking toward the glass. One showed her stepping through. And the last showed this very room. From a distance. As if someone, something, were watching through a telescope made of thought. He dropped the book. But it stayed in his hand. The walls began to close. And from the window, she whispered his name. A name he had forgotten. Until now. I took the manor because no one else would. A listing buried under decades of dust and disinterest, offered by a university archive seeking a detailed structural and historical profile of minor regional estates. Most passed on it due to isolation. It sat deep in the woods near Gallows Creek, far from the conveniences of town. That suited me fine. Solitude breeds focus. The manor had no official name, only a location and an old map etched in fading ink. Its last recorded owner vanished in 1911, something glossed over in the archive as a family matter. That should have raised alarms. But I've always trusted the clarity of blueprints more than the whispers of the past. 12 rooms. The plan said it plainly. 12. 6 on the left wing, 5 on the right, and a library tower at the rear. But when I arrived, when I walked the hall on the second floor for the first time, I counted 13 doors. 13 aged, warped wooden doors, their brass handles green with neglect. I chalked it up to renovation or drafting errors. Surely the 13th was a closet or walled off. But it unsettled me. I spent my first night with that hallway in my thoughts, its doors closed like mouths holding secrets, especially the last one at the far end, slightly narrower, set deeper into the wall, as if it was always reluctant to be noticed. The next day, I searched the manor top to bottom. No hidden spaces behind the walls. No mention of the 13th door in any of the estate's archived floor plans or diaries. The blueprints confirmed it, 12 rooms. Yet the hallway disagreed. I avoided it after dusk. There was something wrong with that final door. I told myself it was just the age of the place. Old houses groan, breathe, remember. But on the fourth night, something changed. At exactly 2:13 a.m., I was woken by a sound so gentle it almost slipped past me, a low creak, as of old hinges turned with care. I sat up, holding my breath. Silence followed, but the kind that waits. In my robe, flashlight trembling in hand, I stepped out into the hall. The air was cooler, as if the house had exhaled. I looked down the corridor. The 13th door was open. Just slightly. And from within, light. Not candlelight. Not gas. A warm, modern glow. I stood frozen in the hallway, the flashlight beam jittering as my hand trembled. The 13th door, once sealed and silent, now stood ajar by no more than an inch. But it was enough to spill a pale amber glow across the old wood floor, steady, electric. A glow that did not belong in a house untouched since 1911. The other rooms wore their age like armor, dust-thick wallpaper, furniture sagging with mildew, curtains moth-eaten to lace. But from this crack in the door came warmth and life. I leaned closer. No smell of dust. No rot. Something was humming, softly. A familiar frequency, like a refrigerator or a low-power light strip. Curiosity, that old unforgiving instinct, clawed at me. I pushed the door open slowly. The room inside was new. That was my first thought. The wallpaper was crisp, pale gray with a simple geometric pattern. A dark blue armchair sat by a standing lamp I recognized from IKEA, of all places. On the desk, yes, a modern desk, rested a laptop, closed. And a ceramic mug, the same brand I'd bought from a clearance shelf 2 years ago. It took me a second to understand what I was seeing. This room looked eerily like my home office. Not identical, but close enough to make the hairs on my arms rise. I backed out, heart pounding, and shut the door. In the morning, I told myself I'd imagined it. A dream brought on by isolation and stress. But when I returned with full light and tools to document it, the 13th door was sealed again. Shut tight, no matter how hard I pushed. No sign of hinges turning or any light beneath. That evening, I set up a camera in the hallway, an old camcorder from my undergrad days. I left it running and went to bed. At 2:13 a.m., I awoke again. No creaking this time. Only silence and a vague presence, like being watched through water. I waited until dawn to review the footage. The tape showed nothing unusual, until 2 hours 12 minutes and 58 seconds. Without a sound, the 13th door swung open, smoothly, like it had always wanted to. The light inside was brighter this time, almost golden. The camera's mic picked up a faint sound, a voice, maybe. A whisper too soft to make out. And then, at 2 hours 14 minutes and 6 seconds, the light shut off. The door eased shut like a sigh. I replayed that final frame over and over. Just before the door closed, the light caught something in the room's reflection, a photograph, resting on the desk. It was a picture of me. But older. And smiling. I should have left. I knew it in that raw, instinctive part of the brain that still remembers how to fear the dark. But I didn't. I was bound, by curiosity, by something older and deeper. The 13th room had opened itself to me, and some part of me wanted to be welcomed. The next night, I did not sleep. I sat in the hallway, back against the wall, camera in my lap. I told myself I wouldn't go in. At exactly 2:13 a.m., the door opened again, this time without hesitation. It didn't creak. It invited. The light inside was brighter than before, and now I could see more clearly. The room no longer resembled my home office. It was my home office. Everything had shifted, down to the faint coffee ring on the right side of the desk. The same book spines. The same cracked phone charger I'd taped months ago. And on the far wall, a mirror. Oval, ornate, and utterly out of place. Not something from my home. I stepped over the threshold. The air changed. Warmer. Humming with low static. Inside, my own footsteps didn't echo. The room felt sealed, like it existed outside the house. Outside time. I walked to the desk. The photograph was there, my face, a few years older, smiling, but the background wasn't my office. It was this room. And then I looked at the mirror. I didn't see my reflection. Not exactly. The person in the glass looked like me. Same clothes, same weary eyes. But he was, still. He didn't blink when I did. Didn't move when I stepped forward. He only smiled. And then, slowly, he raised his hand. I hadn't moved. His palm pressed against the inside of the mirror. I ran. Back into the hallway, doors slamming behind me with such force that it cracked the plaster along the frame. I backed away, trembling. Later, when I returned with tools to inspect the door, it was shut again. Firm. Stubborn. The 13th room hidden like a lie no longer whispered. That day, I found something else. While combing through old estate letters and scrawled journals, I discovered a brief entry from the manor's last owner. dated February 13th, 1911. The door opened again. A younger me stood inside, only he wore a face that had forgotten what mine looked like. He asked no questions. Only smiled. I fear the house remembers too much. I haven't opened the camera file from last night. I'm afraid of what I might see in the final frame. Because this morning, when I returned to the hallway, the 13th door was already open. And this time, I heard footsteps coming out. The 13th door stood wide open now, no longer shy or coy. Its light spilled freely into the hall, warm and unnatural, pulsing faintly like a heartbeat. I didn't want to enter, but I knew it was too late. The house had chosen me. I left the camcorder behind. No camera would capture what waited beyond that threshold. Not truthfully. I stepped inside. The room was brighter than ever. Too bright. And quiet, not empty quiet, but the kind you find in chapels and mausoleums. Reverent. Heavy. The mirror remained, but now it stretched floor to ceiling, as if grown. My reflection no longer matched me. He was older now. Grayer at the temples. A slight stoop to his shoulders. He looked tired. But behind the exhaustion was a softness. A knowing. He beckoned me forward with a flick of his fingers, calm, steady, as though this had all happened before. And on the desk, a journal. Bound in leather I recognized as my own. Open to a page I hadn't written yet. The entry read. Tonight, I remembered everything. I remembered the door didn't open for the first time. It opened again. I remembered the mirror isn't a reflection. It's a promise. A becoming. I remembered I lived here before. Not in this life, but the last. And the one before that. I turned the page. More writing. All in my hand. The house keeps its caretakers close. It does not like to be forgotten. In time, I will understand. In time, I will become the memory it needs me to be. I will stay. I always do. I backed away. Shaking. And that's when I noticed, something had changed outside the mirror. The desk behind me had grown a second chair. The photograph on the desk now showed me sitting inside this room. This very moment. Staring into the mirror. The reflection grinned wider, eyes brimming with pity. He pressed his hand to the glass again, and this time, I felt it. Cold and solid against my cheek. Behind me, the door closed. Not slammed. Not sudden. Just, inevitable. They found the manor a year later, after I stopped replying to emails. The university said I'd abandoned the project. But the next researcher they said never came back either. The house still stands, quiet as ever. And now, in the 13th room, two mirrors face each other across the space, forming an endless corridor of selves. Each one older, more hollow, yet smiling. Somewhere in there. One of them is you.